Welcome to E-Pathshala. I am Dr. Vishal Jadhav, Associate Professor in Sociology at Tilak Maharashtra Vidya-mitra. Today we are going to look at a module called Sociological Methods according to Emil Durkheim. This module comes under the paper Classical Sociological Theory. What is sociology and what should be sociology is something that Durkheim was thinking about when he talks about the rules for sociological method. Is it a science? And if it is a science, how does it differentiate between other sciences? Is it a positivist science in the sense, can social reality be objectively studied? If so, how can it be studied? In thinking out these kinds of intricacies, Durkheim actually comes up with a concept called social fact. According to him, social facts are external structures, social structures, which are invisible really, but which are in many ways normalized and naturalized by individuals and shape our personalities, shape our cognition, shape everything that we think in terms of our social reality. And therefore, Durkheim proposes that if we are to study sociology, which is a science, we need to actually study social facts. Emil Durkheim was a key figure in the institutional period of French sociology. French sociologists in this period used sociological methods, procedures, and put into practice an exclusive sociological approach in the analysis of sociological phenomena which had acquired classical status. Emil Durkheim's The Rules of Sociological Methods is a seminal contribution to sociological research. Durkheim regards sociology as the study of social facts. Social facts for him have very distinctive characteristics. He considers social facts to consist of ways of acting, thinking, and feeling external to the individual and endowed with the power of coercion, by reason of which they control that particular individual. Durkheim's general conception of sociology. Durkheim compared society to an organism with different parts that function to ensure the smooth and orderly operation and evolution of society. He adopted an evolutionary approach in that he considered society to have developed from a traditional to a modern society through the development and expansion of the division of labor. Some sociologists consider him to be a structural functionalist based on the fact that he regarded society as composed of structures that functioned in an integrated manner. To construct such an approach, Durkheim distinguished structure from function. He considered society to be composed of individuals, but also made it very clear that society was not just the sum of individuals in their actions, behaviors, and thoughts, but instead, society has got a structure and existence of its own, apart from the individuals who live in it. Moreover, he posited that society, through norms, social facts, common sentiment, influence, constrain, and even coerce individuals who live in it. It stands out now very clearly that Durkheim was concerned with the issue of social order. So the main question of the day for him was, how does modern society blend together, given that society is composed of many individuals, each acting in an individual and autonomous manner, with separate, distinct, and different interests? To answer this question, Adam Saidy would say that Durkheim focused on problems of reconciling freedom and morality, individualism and social cohesion in modern society. These lead Durkheim to write his first book, The Division of Labor in Society, in which he explored and explained these issues. If one goes through the work of Durkheim as explained in Saidy, one realizes that he proposes three main approaches to sociology. The first is positivism. This approach portrays society as an orderly and rational and social scientist through a careful study of history and society around them can develop an understanding of the world. Auguste Comte is often considered as the key proponent of this approach. The second approach is evolutionism. This approach presents the society as slowly changing, and the process of change includes self-corrections to problems in the social world. The third approach is the functionalist. This is where we are actually coming to. Durkheim is often considered as a functionalist. In functionalism, society seen as a resemblance to some biological organism or body with interrelated parts. All these parts have to function together before we can talk of a healthy body. The functionalist approach was adopted by the less conservative sociologists. As already mentioned, Durkheim adopted this approach too. But according to Seide, Durkheim clearly distinguished between functional and causal explanation of social facts. By this, one is asserting that Durkheim understood that it was necessary to explain the reasons why particular social structures emerged historically, and if such structures were functional, this required a separate explanation. Durkheimian understanding of sociology. Durkheim distinguished sociology from philosophy, psychology, economics, and other social science disciplines by arguing that society was an entirety of its own. One of the major aims was to help define and establish the field of sociology as an academic discipline. He argued that sociologists should study particular features of collective or group life. He defined sociology as the study of social facts, things which are external to and coercive of individuals. These social facts for Durkheim are features of the groups. They cannot be studied apart from the collective, nor can they be derived from the study of individuals. Examples of these social facts are religion, urban structures, legal systems, and moral values such as family values. Durkheim argues that these are features of collective existence which are not reducible to features of atoms or individuals that make it up. From this perspective, Durkheim considers the beliefs, practices, and consciousness of collective to be coercive on individuals as actors. If one follows this trajectory, one realizes that he has got a structuralist approach, considering the social structures to exert a strong influence on social action. From this, individuals act not on a purely individualistic basis, but rather they act in ways that are strongly influenced by the structures of which they are part. He goes ahead to say that sociology can be distinguished from psychology. Psychology for him is study of individuals and their mental processes, whereas sociologists are considered with the structures that influence social action and interaction. It is this study of society as a whole, individuals in their social relations with other individuals and connections of these social relationships to society that constitute the subject matter of sociology. Social facts. Durkheim conceived of sociology as the scientific study of reality, a clearly defined group of phenomena different from those studied by all other sciences, biology and psychology included. It was for this phenomena that Durkheim reserved the term social facts. Social facts are a category of facts which present very special characteristics. They consist of manners of acting, thinking, and feeling external to the individual, which are invested with a coercive power by virtue of which they exercise control over him. As per his theory, Durkheim was particularly concerned to distinguish social facts, which he sometimes describes as states of collective mind, from forms these states assumed when manifested through private individual minds. This distinction is most obvious in cases like customs, moral and legal rules, religious beliefs, which indeed appear to have existence independent of the various actions they determine. Moreover, Durkheim posited that a social fact is every way of acting, fixed or not, capable of exercising on the individual an external constraint, or again, every way of acting which is general throughout a given society, while at the same time existing in its own right, independent of its individual manifestations. Social action facts then consist of ways of acting, thinking, and feeling external to the individual. These ways of thinking could not be confused with biological phenomena, since they consist of representations and of actions, nor with their psychological phenomena, which exist only in the individual consciousness and through it. They constitute therefore new variety of phenomena, and it is exclusively that he terms social ought to be applied. One thing Durkheim insisted upon was the fact that social facts were not simply limited to ways of functioning, for example of thinking, feeling, but also extended to ways of being. For example, the number, nature, and relation of the parts of society, the size and geographical distribution of its population, the nature and extent of its communication networks. Ways of recognizing social facts. Durkheim gave two answers to questions on how one could recognize social facts. One pointed backward to the division of labor, and the other pointed forward to suicide. Since the essential trait of social facts is the external coercive power, Durkheim in his first place suggested that social facts could be recognized by existence of some predetermined legal sanction, or in the case of moral and religious beliefs, by their reaction to those forms of individual beliefs and actions which they perceived as threatening. But where the exercise of social constraint is less direct, as in those forms of economic organization which give rise to anomie, the presence is more easily ascertained by the generality combined with objectivity. But whether direct or indirect, the essential defining characteristic of social fact remain their external coercive power as manifested through the constraint they exercise on the individual. The second class of structural facts, Durkheim argued, exhibits precisely the same characteristics of externality and coercion as the first. For example, a political organization restricts our behavior no less than political ideology, and a communication network no less than the thought to be conveyed. In fact, Durkheim insisted that there would be no two classes at all, for the structural feature of society were nothing more than social functions which had been consolidated over long periods of time. Rules for observing social facts. The starting point for Durkheim is that he considers social facts as things. Before having any scientific idea about any social phenomena, we develop our commonsensical notions about these phenomena. This is because a reflection comes before science. It is very difficult to discard these notions because social things are actualized only through humans. They are a product of human activity, yet we must separate social phenomena from the conscious things which they represent. Only then will scientific objectivity be possible. The first of these corollaries is all preconception must be systematically avoided. This is a method that Durkheim borrowed from Descartes, the French philosopher. Durkheim goes ahead to argue that the sociologist must deny himself the use of the concept formed outside of science for extra scientific needs. The sociologist must free himself from the fallacious notions which hold sway over the mind of the ordinary person, shaking off once and for all the yoke of all those empirical categories that long habit often makes tyrannical. Defining phenomena. The second rule that Durkheim advances for the observation of social fact is that the subject matter of research must only include a group of phenomena defined beforehand by certain common external characteristics, and all phenomena which correspond to this definition must be so included. To this he backs up by insisting that every scientific investigation must begin by defining that specific group of phenomena with which it is concerned. If this definition is too objective, it must refer not to some ideal conception of these phenomena, but to those properties which are both inherent in the phenomena themselves and externally visible at the earlier stages of the investigation. He followed this procedure in his book, The Division of Labor, presenting social facts in isolation from the individual manifestations. On the final note, Durkheim asserts that when sociologist undertakes to investigate any order of social facts, he must strive to consider them from a viewpoint where they present themselves in isolation from their individual manifestations. Science, as we have seen, he says, must dismiss those pre-notions formed through common extra-scientific experience and create its concept anew on the basis of systematically observable data. By making this assertion, he also was aware that even in the natural sciences, sense experience itself could be subjective, so that observable data too personal to the observer were discarded, and only those exhibiting a required degree of objectivity were retained. In this light, then sociological observations ought to be equally objective, and thus social facts should be detached as completely as possible from the individual facts by which they are manifested. Rules for distinguishing the normal from the pathological. Durkheim speaks of the necessity of distinguishing the normal from the pathological. In his book, The Division of Labor, social fact exhibits both normal and pathological forms, and he added it was an important part in the sociological method to provide rules for distinguishing between them. They are clear out as facts which are as they should be and facts which ought to be something other than what they are. Normal social facts are those which appear in the most general forms. The others are called morbid or pathology. Durkheim's criterion was to discover in the ordinary distinction between what is general and what is exceptional. Social facts which are the normal by this criteria would simply be those found in most, if not all, individuals, within narrow limits of variation. Social facts which are pathological, by contrast, would be those encountered only in minority of cases and only for brief periods in the lifetime of individuals, even where they occur. Rules for the constitution of social types. According to the second rule in the earlier part, a social fact can be labeled normal or pathological only in relation to a given social type or species. Durkheim's next stop was thus to set out rules for the constitution or classification of such species. In particular, he sought a middle way between the historians, for whom each society is unique and incomparable, and the philosophers, for whom different societies are only various expressions of the fundamental attributes of human nature. In other words, Durkheim was after an intermediate entity which would acknowledge the unity required by scientific generalization as well as diversity inherent in facts. As the means to this end, Durkheim again endorsed the method advocated in Bacon's Novum Organum, namely to look for decisive or crucial facts which, regardless of their number, have scientific value or interest, but which facts are most decisive or crucial, clearly those facts which explain other facts. And in this sense, Durkheim admitted explanation and classification are interdependent, and neither can proceed very far in the absence of the other. Rule for the explanation of social facts. From the beginning, Durkheim shows dislike towards the confusion of teleological function of social fact. Therefore, when one undertakes to explain a social phenomena, the efficient cause which produces it and the function it fulfills must be investigated separately. In other words, he distinguishes between causal and functional analysis. He argued against psychological explanation of social facts and posited that the determining causes of social fact should be sought among social facts preceding it and not amongst the states of individual consciousness. If the society is only focused on achieving certain ends, then this end surely must be the individual. The origin and development of society would thus be result of individual mind. So sociologists must abandon the psychological explanation and must arrive at the heart of social facts. Durkheim argued that the function of social facts must be sought in relation to some end. By doing this, he felt back to the whole idea of teleological explanation of social facts, which he did not appreciate from the onset. This type of argument has been severely criticized, for if society is set up with end result, then the organization of families would be conjugal and parental emotions, economic institutions will be desire of wealth, and religion will only provoke emotion by the fear. At the end of the day, Durkheim establishes that the function of a social fact must always be sought in the relationship it bears to some social end. The primary origin of social processes of any importance must be sought in the constitution of the inner social environment. Finally, rules for the dissertation of social proof. How then can we demonstrate that one phenomenon is the cause of another? This was one of the challenging questions for Durkheim. According to Durkheim, we can only compare those cases where both are simultaneously present or absent and ask whether the variations they display in their different circumstances suggest that one depends on the other. Whether two phenomena are produced artificially by the observer, we call this method experimentation. And where the artificial production of phenomena is impossible, we compare them as they have been produced naturally, a procedure called indirect experimentation or comparative method. Durkheim was convinced that sociology was limited solely to the later method. That led him to reject both Auguste Comte's historical method, which depended on an acceptance of his tendentious laws of social progress, and Mill's suggestion that even indirect experimentation is inapplicable to the study of social phenomena. In particular, Durkheim attacked Mill's postulate that the same effect can result from various causes as one which would render the scientific analysis of such causes utterly intractable. Thus, to conclude, we have seen how Durkheim, through his understanding of social facts, tried to bring about a theory, a methodology of sociology. Herein, he tried to understand how sociology can be extremely objective and need not necessarily depend on subjectivities and on frailties of humans and human emotions. Durkheim, in his outset, very clearly states that social facts can actually bring about information and bring about knowledge of society which is invisible to the naked eye. Therefore, one can actually see how certain processes, phenomena, practices occur in society, how people conform to social rules and normative orders, and why they conform to these kinds of normative orders is because of these social facts.